The night was heavy with tension. The cold wind whipped through the narrow streets of downtown Atlanta as Officer Daniel Hayes tightened his grip on the pistol in his hand. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, trembling slightly as it landed on the figure of a woman, tall, poised and calm, even as the red and blue lights flickered across her dark skin. Her hands were raised, her voice steady, but Daniel's heart pounded in his ears louder than her words. In those few seconds, the world felt like it was holding its breath. All he saw was a suspect. All she saw was fear. And then everything changed when the small black wallet fell from her coat pocket, flipping open to reveal a glint of silver, a CIA badge. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of understanding, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to a channel name. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the truth isn't what we first see, it's what lies beneath. The air around them froze. Daniel's gun lowered slowly, his arms trembling as realization crashed over him like a tidal wave. The woman, Agent Maya Carter, stood silent, her calmness masking years of pain, of battles fought not on foreign soil but in her own country, where judgment came too easily and trust too slowly. Her eyes were steady, yet filled with something Daniel couldn't name, something between exhaustion and forgiveness. He dropped to his knees not out of fear but out of shame. The metal of his badge felt heavier than ever before. Daniel had been on the force for 12 years. He'd seen things that hardened him, trained to react before thinking, to survive before understanding. He'd lost friends to ambushes, seen families destroyed, and he'd built a wall inside himself to keep the darkness out. But that night, when he pointed his weapon at Maya, he realized the wall had also kept out compassion. He wasn't just protecting people. He was losing his humanity one mistaken assumption at a time. Maya picked up her badge from the ground, brushing off the dust as the flashing lights reflected in her eyes. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. Instead, she asked if he was all right. The question pierced through Daniel more deeply than any accusation ever could. How could she ask about him when he had nearly taken everything from her? That night, in the silence that followed, Daniel couldn't sleep. The image of Maya's face haunted him. The quiet strength, the unspoken pain, the restraint. He found himself reading about her the next morning. CIA agent Maya Carter, decorated for bravery, responsible for saving dozens during a foreign hostage operation 2 years earlier. A woman who had dedicated her life to protecting a country that had just doubted her existence in a heartbeat. For the next few days, Daniel couldn't shake the weight of his guilt. He thought of the headlines, the stories of mistakes that cost lives. He thought of how close he'd come to becoming one of those stories. He decided to find her, not as an officer, but as a man seeking redemption. When he finally did, it wasn't easy. Maya was private, cautious, and not interested in reliving that night. But Daniel persisted, not to justify himself, but to understand, to learn. When Maya finally agreed to meet him for coffee, the first thing she said was, "You don't owe me an apology. You owe yourself honesty." Her words struck him. For the first time, Daniel opened up about his fears, the fear of failure, the pressure of judgment, the exhaustion of living in a world where one wrong move could end everything. Maya listened quietly, her eyes never leaving his face. Then she told him her story. Maya grew up in a rough neighborhood where the sound of sirens was as common as morning birds. Her father had been arrested wrongly once, a memory that stayed with her and shaped her determination. She'd worked twice as hard as anyone around her, not for approval, but to prove that purpose was stronger than prejudice. Joining the CIA had been her way of changing the narrative, to protect not just lives, but perceptions. Yet even in her success, she faced whispers, doubts, and glances that reminded her the fight was far from over. Daniel listened to her, feeling something shift inside him. He realized that night wasn't just about a gun and a badge. It was about 2 lives standing on opposite sides of fear. One wearing a uniform, one wearing resilience. Both human, both scarred by a system that sometimes forgot humanity in its quest for order. In the weeks that followed, Daniel started attending community meetings, something he'd once dismissed as symbolic. He spoke to young officers about the danger of assumptions, about the cost of split-second judgment. He invited Maya to one of those sessions, and when she walked in, silence filled the room. She stood before them, not as a victim, but as a teacher. Her voice was steady as she said, "Every person you face has a story. Sometimes you only get one chance to listen." From that day, something changed in the department. Officers started training differently, learning about empathy, understanding, and restraint. Daniel became one of the leading advocates for reform, driven not by duty, but by personal awakening. And Maya, she continued her work, quietly changing lives, often from the shadows. But every year, on the anniversary of that night, Daniel sent her a single white lily with a note that said, "A thank you for showing me what real courage looks like." Years later, during a public ceremony honoring community heroes, Daniel stood on stage and told their story. Not to glorify himself, but to remind everyone listening that humanity isn't lost. It just needs to be remembered. As he spoke, Maya sat in the front row, her eyes glistening but her expression proud. When the applause erupted, it wasn't just for her bravery or his redemption, it was for the possibility that compassion can heal even the deepest divide. And sometimes healing begins the moment we stop seeing differences and start seeing people. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to a channel name. Let's keep spreading stories that remind the world that compassion still matters, and that change begins when we choose to see beyond fear. Speech balloon before you go. Tell us in the comments, do you believe one moment of understanding can change an entire life? Because sometimes all it takes is lowering the gun and opening your heart.